scuba dive.
Okay.
And I have scuba with the sharks, but not intentionally. But a nurse shark. It was kind of like, oh, look at that. But when I was in Hawaii and we were diving, there was a big group that was out that was swimming with the dolphins. Mm-hmm. And I really wanted to go out there, but, you know, my two people that were with me didn't want to go. So I didn't want to go by myself. That would not have been.
Oh, they're so awesome. I've swum with them. We've got Nancy and Vincent. Yeah. Right? Good to see you. Who else is here?
Vincent's my guy from New Jersey.
Dee is here. Oh,
and Dee.
Where in New Jersey? Let me unmute everybody. Hang on.
All right.
Yeah, I see Dee. Hello, hello.
Yeah, because I think all the new packs are available through social selling.
Oh, there's Nancy.
So if she orders one of the new,
I'll mute her because she's talking. Vincent, where in New Jersey are you from?
Vincent, where are you at?
Where?
Williamstown.
Williamstown. I'm from Manasquan, from down the shore. Where's Williamstown?
It's up by Philly.
Okay. Okay.
So and I was born in Hackensack.
You were?
Or actually, I was born in Patterson, yeah.
I did not know that.
Yeah.
I was born in Scotland, so I wasn't.
We're Jersey girls.
Yeah, we're Jersey girls. Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. Oh, Linda's here too. And Gary. Terrific. I'm so excited to see everybody coming on. I'm really excited about this book. Have you guys been getting into it yet?
Yes.
I did. I read it, and I'm excited because it just goes along with what we were doing in Bible study.
Oh,
how wonderful. How wonderful. We've got a new Bible study, a book study that we're going to do, and it was, hang on, let me see if any of you know this book. We're starting at the end of January, but it is called Mere Christianity by C.S. Lewis. So we're going to read that one. So I'm excited for that too. Can never get enough, you know, it's always fun to do it. So Dana Skinner is
I did here. The audio.
Glenda, you made it without my reminder. Yay.
Hello, Dee. See, we didn't recognize you're getting so thin.
Oh yeah, that's right.
She's going to be the sexiest 70-year-old at the next class reunion. I'm going to be right by you. Right.
Can you hear me?
Yes.
Yes.
Mm-hmm.
Oh, okay, good. I'm not going to, show me because I'm in my jammies.
Oh.
You know what? It's so funny that you say that, Dee, because I was thinking about doing some kind of a play at some point on the P and Pamela and pajamas and doing like a paperback with Pamela, PJ paperback or something silly like that. Because it, one of the cool things that we can do in this business is we can work in our pajamas and people don't need to know, what we look like, how we are. It's kind of cool.
Right.
That's right.
Yeah.
Who was that lady? Who was the one at GoPro where she said, I only do video 2 days a week because I only want to put my hair, fix my hair.
That's right. That's right. I forgot about that. Yep. Oh my gosh.
She was really good. She was really good.
Yeah. Okay. I'm going to give just a little bit more time because I know there were a lot of people who said that they were going to be coming on. And I want us to all get started together because even though we're going to cover the first 3 chapters, there's not a lot, but I want to make sure that we get all the questions answered and get everything in order as we go forward. Was everyone able to get the book and the workbook?
Yeah.
Yeah. Oh, there's Peggy. Hi, sweetie.
I just have the book. I got it from the library.
Hello, how are you?
Good. Well, the workbook
Hi, everyone.
We're not going to do until, hey, Claire, glad to have you. Oh, Dana said fighting the flu, looking kind of rough, so not going to be on camera. Oh, I'm so sorry. It's been bad all across the country. I'm so sorry that you're feeling crummy, but we're glad you're here, so that's a wonderful thing. So Claire is here too. The workbook we're not going to get into until later on. So I just want to make sure that you have it ready because we don't start it right away. I'll let you know when it's going to be coming time to use it. And I'm going to try and see if we can get through 2 or 3 chapters in a week. We may not be able to do that once we get into the real meat and potatoes, because I want to make sure that we get all the details. But I know that these first 3 chapters are really kind of like an introduction all together in themselves. And so I figured that would be a good place to start. So, okay, so, excuse me. One of the things that I love are all the little quotes that Gary Keller adds in. And remember that the title of the book is The One Thing, the surprisingly simple truth behind extraordinary results. And there's a lot of things just even in this very beginning of, you know, changing the mindset of understanding of the things that you're expected to do in order to get the results that you want. And they're very contrary to what society or employment has taught us. And so I found that to be very fascinating. But one of the very beginning quotes is, if you chase 2 rabbits, you will not catch either one. And that's a Russian proverb. And I love how he has the little rabbit footprints going through the snow, and you'll see that they cross each other. So you may think you're going to catch both rabbits at one point because they're intersecting as they're going forward, but then they both run off in separate directions and you end up catching neither. Oh, I'm going to mute everybody until we get started. But here's the thing is that, okay, I want you all to be able to, at certain points, pop in and provide information, raise your hand, or, put a little note on the sideline if you have a question or want to interject something. But I want to make sure that we all interact together on this. Welcome, Patrick. Glad to have you here. Okay, so the first chapter is actually called The One Thing. And I thought this was cute too. Be like a postage stamp. Stick to one thing until you get there. And that was very cute. And then he goes on to talk about a movie called City Slickers. That's from back in the, he says, what is it, 1991. But he talks about 2 characters in the movie having a conversation. And one of them, and this is a comedic group because it's Jack Palance and Billy Crystal. And just thinking of Billy Crystal makes me chuckle because he's just such an incredibly funny guy. But do you know what the secret of life is? And Mitch responds to Curly, no, what? And Curly says, this. He holds up one finger. And he says, your finger. He goes, one thing, just one thing. You stick to that, and everything else doesn't mean boop, doesn't mean baloney. Okay, so, and that was the secret of success. And the funny thing is that from this silly comedic movie came such an incredibly poignant thought concept. The one thing is the best approach to getting what you want. And he didn't really get it until later on. He said he'd experienced success in the past, but it wasn't until he hit a wall that he began to connect his results with his approach. Okay. And he said that in all of his hard work, he was building this successful company that was getting to national and international levels, but they were failing. And he said, we've got to figure this out. Something's got to give. And he said, at the end of a short rope that looked eerily like a noose, I sought help and found it in the form of a coach. And that's what's so critical here, is that the one thing, as he talks about this in the beginning, can be one person, a mentor, somebody who can help you to get through and figure out those things, the one thing that is so very important to the next step in your level of success. So I just thought that was beautiful. But to think at the end of a short rope that looked eerily like a noose, how many of you have been at that point where you think, I am just done, I'm going to throw in the towel? I had a conversation with somebody today about that, where it was a very, very recent circumstance. And they said, oh my gosh, last week for like 3 days, I was out the door, I was ready to go. And I know I've been there. And it's hard because we have that guy that sits on our shoulder that Tom talks about all the time, the guy that we need to punch in the nose. And that guy, unfortunately, often has the voice of someone very near and dear to us, whether it is someone present or someone past. And so even though someone we loved very much or love now may be saying things that are counterproductive to our level of success, right? And so we need to have in each other these mentors. That's why it is so critical for us to lift each other up, why it's so important to be a part of 65 Days in a Wake Up, to be able to have that accountability with each other, to find an accountability partner that you can say, okay, I know you've got my back. I need you to help me to get to this, because if I leave it to my own druthers, it's going to just be kicked, the can is going to be kicked down the road, right? So we need to help each other with this. So he goes on to say that I walked this coach through my situation and talked through the challenges I faced, both personal and professional. We revisited my goals and the trajectory I wanted for my life, and with a full grasp of the issues, he set out in search of answers. And the next time they got together, he had an organizational chart on the wall, a bird's eye view there for everyone to see. And the simple question of that discussion was, do you know what you need to do to turn things around? And he looked at him. He's like, I don't have a clue. And he talked about the complete change of faces in his industry. And he goes on to say there were 14 positions that needed new faces. And he was shocked, and Gary was shocked and said, I let him know I thought it would take a lot more than that. And he said, no, Jesus needed 12, but you'll need 14. And it was a transformational moment for him. What became obvious is that as focused as I thought I wasn't focused enough. Okay? So you may think you're focused, but you may not be properly focused. You may not be focusing on the right thing, that one thing that's important for your success. Okay, so he made some dramatic changes, and that's a difficult thing to come to grips with when you are in a top position. Sometimes you need to step back and do something a little bit differently. And he said extraordinary success showed up, and we never looked back, right? So he had to take a little bit of a humility pill in order to get to his next level. And he said, having found the 14, I began working with our top people individually to build their careers and businesses. Out of habit, I would end our coaching call with a recap of the handful of things that we're agreeing to accomplish before our next session. Unfortunately, many would get most of them done, but not necessarily what mattered most. Results suffered and frustration followed. Okay, so this is where he's having the conversation with his team. Okay. And they all have their own individual plan, right, of what they're supposed to do, or their tasks, their responsibilities. And so even though they had the intent of coming back and having satisfied those responsibilities, it still wasn't getting done. Okay. And I thought that was very interesting. So let's see. If you can do just 3 things a week, so this is what he was basically negotiating with his team. If you can do 3 things this week, if you can just do 2 things this week, and finally, out of desperation, he went as small as he could possibly go. And he said, what's the one thing you can do this week such that by doing it, everything else would be easier or unnecessary? And the most awesome thing happened. Results went through the roof. This is the quote that Marianne had brought up the other day, because you need to stop and think, what is the one thing that you can do? And he says in this particular instance this week, but we go even further, especially in 65 Days in a Wake Up, to say, what is the one thing you can do today in one day? Take it one day at a time. So when results went through the roof, after these experiences, he looked back on his success and failure and discovered an interesting pattern. Where he had huge success, he had narrowed the concentration to one thing, and where success varied, his focus had 2. Okay, so let's stop there for a second, and I want you to kind of share with me the trials and tribulations you may have had with focus, if any of you can do that. So just unmute yourselves or raise your hand and I'll unmute you. Talk about some things that might distract your focus. Oh, Miss Marianne. Oh, I'm trying to unmute you.
Oh, I see. Okay.
There you go.
What's that? Go
ahead.
Peggy.
Go ahead, Peggy, honey.
I know. I think in general, especially with the business, a good example is just getting distracted in too many directions. You know, a lot of different calls, a lot of different YouTubes, a lot of different, and I know for me, you know, I whether it be a course or you know, program or anything, and sometimes that to do what you have to do that one thing and say no. Just start saying no to certain things.
Oh, that's a really good one. That's really important
I'm
for all of
not
us to remember.
like maybe you know, go back time, like make a certain time to maybe catch up with important ones, right? You know, that's just an example of how I see that can happen just in our business alone.
Absolutely. Thank you. Thank you. And Marianne, you know, it's really interesting because somebody made reference to this to you. I don't know if you saw it today on Facebook, but someone said it's okay to say no. So I don't know if that was a subject that was discussed on Tuesday night at the meeting, but it's like, yeah, it's learning how to say no.
Yeah.
So what were you going to say?
Well, and I am, you know, a lot of what I've been working on is with, and Dee and I ran at Dan Walschmidt class. And so we really had to kind of dig deep into who we were in our business and, you know, things that we wanted to be focused on and getting clarity and all of that. And I think a lot of that has shown up and is very similar to what, you know, this book is about. But what he was saying too is like you pick one important thing a day, right? And so that one, the big project, whatever it is, or he said you pick 3 medium projects or 5 small projects. And I think what we do is, no, I should say, I think what I do is I'm doing the 1 big project, the 3 medium projects, the, you know, 10 small projects. And so that was true. Denise told me it was okay to say no. I'm not so sure Tom was encouraged by that, but just what Peggy said is yeah. And sometimes, and so it was really interesting because he sent me an email today and asked me to do something, and I emailed him back and I said, is it okay if James does this tomorrow? Because I'm, you know, he expects everything, right? And so that's how I'm doing it, because that's what's expected. And I think, you know, I was able to say, is it okay if we do it tomorrow? And he said yes. So,
and might I add, that's what's been provided, right? So it's not only what's expected, but it's what's been provided. You have had the ability to provide whenever he asked, right?
Right. So anyway, so saying no, Peggy, that's excellent. And I also believe that getting that clarity of the one thing, and it's even bigger than that, but we can talk more about that later. But anyway, yeah, good stuff. Saying no. Say no. Just say no.
Just say no. Just say no. So anybody else have any other distractions that might come into play that can keep them from the one important thing, you know, in your head? I think we all, as we come to grips as go forward in this book, you'll really come to realize what the one thing is that you'll need to get done. And sometimes, do any of you ever find that you will find things to do to avoid the one thing that you think you should do? Yeah. So I've been there. I know that. Okay, so let's go on. Oh, yes, ma'am. Miss Nancy, let me unmute you. Yes, ma'am.
Sorry about the beginning. I was on the phone actually with Longevity when I first clicked into you, so I don't know if you were talking to me because I muted you.
No worries.
Anyways, but I wanted to be there at the start. A couple things that I'm working in the background because I don't have my book, so I'm listening. I mean, all varieties of social and digital media and that kind of thing can be distractions. You know, so that's one. And another biggie for myself personally, that I guess I'm one of those people that to look at me, you don't see the problem, whatever, but is a health issue, a health pain. And that can be very distracting, and I have found that very distracting. I'm dealing with a certain situation that has been nagging me for years, and I am determined that we will overcome this issue. But it's a time thing. But there are some days where a physical condition can actually distract you.
Absolutely, thank you for that. Yeah. It's very true. And there can be emotional issues. There's all kinds, and Nancy, you just hit that very well. There can be personal things that are going on, whether for ourselves or for people close to us, that can really be distracting. And, you know, there are times where we need to realize our priorities need to be in order, and we will talk about that. That sometimes the priority is we have to take care of our family. We have to take care of an emergent situation that comes up, and what is the one thing at that particular point that we need to address in order to go forward. And it's okay to have those moments too. So I want you to give yourself permission to be able to say, I need to be able to step aside for something that is there. And you need to be able to have those priorities in your life. You know, for me, it's God first, my husband, my kids, my career. And so I need to be able to keep things in that proper perspective. And I say that because that's what I understand God to have directed me to have. And I need to make sure that the things that I'm doing in my life are aligning with those particular personal priorities. And then there are priorities within each category of my life, you know, and so you have to think about what is the one thing that's important. So, you know, for example, with God, I need to be able to take the time with him. I need to be in prayer. I need to be in meditation in the word. I need to, you know, be fellowshipping with other Christians for me. So that's where I need to think about. And then I need to think about the time that I need to have with my husband. That's important. And what's the one thing that's important about that? You know, so I think that it can really, and that's the beauty of this, about how he talks about that this is something that can be so life-changing for your family, for your personal life, for your career, that all these things come together to create something really fabulous. And that's what I saw going through 65 days in a wake up for the multiple times that I did it, was that not only did it change the way that I connect with people on a business level, but it changed the way that I connect with people on a personal level and getting to know people on a deeper level, even family and friends that you think you know. But when you really start to get into asking those right questions, things will shift. Okay, so thank you all for that. So the next little section he talks about is called going small. If everyone has the same number of hours in a day, why do some people seem to get so much more done than others? How do they do more, achieve more, earn more, have more? And the answer is they make getting to the heart of things the heart of their approach. They go small. Okay, so those big things that we get done by doing them in small ways. When you want the absolute best chance to succeed at anything you want, your approach should always be the same: go small. And he goes on to define going small is ignoring all the things you could do and doing what you should do. It's recognizing that not all things matter equally and finding the things that matter most. It's a tighter way to connect with what you do, with what you do with what you want. And extraordinary results are directly determined by how narrow you can make your focus. Okay, so remember he talked about the 3 things that he wanted his people to do, and then he said, well, how about the 2 things? And then he got it down to the one thing, and when they focused on that one thing, then all of a sudden everything began to come together, and it was magical. Okay. So the way to get the most out of your work and your life is to go as small as possible. Most people think it's just the opposite. They think big success is time-consuming and complicated. As a result, their calendars and to-do lists become overloaded and overwhelming. Success starts to feel out of reach, so they settle for less, unaware that big success comes when we do a few things well. They get lost trying to do too much, and in the end accomplish too little. Over time, they lower their expectations, abandon their dreams, and allow their life to get small. This is the wrong thing to make small. And this is very interesting because I think about Tom and how he is, because he'll tell you about how simple his life is and how little he has to do. However, one thing he's very adept at is having people do things very well for him, right? And so he's got Marianne, right? Denise and he are a beautiful team because the things that they do together complement each other. And this brings to mind Eric Worre. One of the things that he had talked about is think about the things that you do that take up your time and take you away from the important things you need to do, and hire somebody to do them for you. So for example, if it's cleaning the house or cutting the grass, right? Those things that you could be giving someone else to do, that it might cost you some money to get done, or it might be a little bit of a hardship for time. However, it might give you more of the time that you need in order to be able to focus on the one thing that would be the success level for you. Okay, so does that make sense to everybody? About being really, really focused. Okay. So when you spread yourself out, you end up spread thin. You want your achievements to add up, but that actually takes subtraction. Again, when Tom and I were having the conversation about how 65 and a wake up was like learning addition and subtraction, and then the next step where we get into the follow-up, we get into the real meat and potatoes, that's where we learn multiplication and division, and even further still, learning about geometry and calculus and going on from there. You have to do it in these little baby steps, right? Excuse me. Turn that off. Okay, so you need to be doing fewer things for more effect instead of doing more things with side effect. The problem with trying to do too much is that even if it works, adding more to your work and your life without cutting anything brings a lot of bad with it. Missed deadlines, disappointing results, high stress, long hours, lost sleep, poor diet, no exercise, and missed moments with family and friends. And see, that's where it is all of a sudden, everything starts to fall apart when we try to do too much. And that's why it is so important to be able to say no about certain things. So going small is a simple approach to extraordinary results, and it works. And he says it works all the time, anywhere, and on anything, because it has only one purpose: to ultimately get you to the point. And what is the shortest distance between 2 points? Anybody remember that a straight line? That's right, Marianne. A straight line. Yeah. So you don't want this big circuitous route where you're all over the place. You want to get beeline straight to the point. When you go as small as possible, you'll be staring at one thing, and that's the point. So now going on to chapter 2, the domino effect. And by the way, the domino effect is the concept for the back portion of our book, of our journaling section in the workbook, where we go through the 66-day journal, because they refer to, you have the 66 days and you put today's date, and then it says today's domino. So that's where this portion will tie in, but we don't go there yet. But if you're in 65 days and a wake up, you're kind of doing it anyway. But this is another way to cement that in for you. So B.J. Thornton said, every great change starts like falling dominoes. And I love this because he talks about a study that was done in the Netherlands on Domino Day in 2009, where they're talking about how many dominoes and what changes can be affected from tripping just one domino over, right? Each standing domino represents a small amount of potential energy. The more you line up, the more potential energy you've accumulated. And then you line up enough, and with a simple flick, you can start a chain reaction of surprising power. And they proved it because they had a ridiculous amount, like 5 million dominoes, almost. It was 4,491,000, blah, blah, blah. But the energy that it created was 94,000 joules of energy, which is the same amount it takes for an average male to do 545 push-ups. Oh my gosh, shoot me now. I just can't stand that. So, okay. Oh, we have raised hands. I'm sorry. Dee, you had a raised hand. Go ahead, Dee. What do you need, honey bun?
Oh, am I unmuted?
Yes, ma'am.
Oh, okay. Well, Eric Worre was talking about this yesterday in my webinar about how you do an activity here, an activity, an activity, an activity, an activity. And pretty soon, even though you don't see anything going on the first couple of months, maybe, all of a sudden that activity goes and you see the results. Well, it works the other way too. Yeah, you don't do an activity, you don't do an activity, you don't do an activity, and all of a sudden the dominoes are falling off. And so what we do or do not do is a huge domino effect. Even though we might not see the results for a while, don't think those dominoes aren't moving.
Ooh, beautiful point. Thank you. Yes. And by the way, I don't know if you all had seen the video that I shared that Eric had posted, that his beloved mentor, John Joyce, passed away yesterday. And so that's who he was talking about in his book, GoPro. And, you know, he was very good friends with his father, and it just really broke him up. So send him a little note of love and support about that, because, you know, it is hard. And sometimes it's really interesting. I was talking with my husband about this. Sometimes you can lose a family member, but to lose a mentor, there's sometimes something very, very different about that. There is a relationship there that is not a required relationship, but it's an important one and something that can be very deep. And he was visibly very shaken and was crying during that Facebook Live that he presented. So give him some love, because he's given us a lot of love, and I really appreciate him. So Linda, I see that you have your hand raised too, and I apologize for the delay. So go ahead, you're unmuted, darling.
I had my hand, am I unmuted? Okay, I had my hand raised from earlier on. I do like what Marianne said, that when Tom asked her to do something, she, instead of just saying no, and sometimes it is okay to say no, but since she has trained him that it will get done, she gave him an alternative and or a solution to it. She said, would it be okay if James did it tomorrow? And so he didn't have to think about, oh my God, it's not going to get done. It was like, oh, okay, I can deal with that. And so it answered any objections right away. So that was a really good thing. And then what Nancy said about the health issues, I struggle with that too. I mean, yesterday I had 3 back-to-back appointments set up, and the first one was my chiropractor, and something happened at the chiropractor office. He wouldn't even let me leave the office. So I had to call and cancel the next appointment. And it was just a domino effect that my health oftentimes stops me from doing things that I want to do. And I never know when it's going to be a problem, when it's not. So, you know, I just look at everything that I need to do, and I just go, okay, how do I do it all? You know, and I'm hoping the study's going to help me with that, because I just look at, I have the house, you know, I own my own house and I'm alone in it. And so I have my house and the health issues, and I've got this and that, you know, and cooking, and I was trying to do a blog and trying to do longevity, and it's just all way too much. I got to figure out how to do this one thing.
Yes. And like I said, finding that one thing, and the one thing becomes different for different aspects of your life too. And so figuring out what is the most important one thing that you need to do. for the particular point that you're trying to achieve. And so we'll keep you in prayer about your healing process as well. And it can be very, very distracting when you're going through a lot of health challenges. And I think we all do. I remember this summer when my hip went out of joint, and it was just excruciating. There's things that you can look okay and people have no idea. And I think Nancy was talking about that people may not be aware at all of what you're going through. And it's really interesting. Actually, my mother-in-law she's now just needing to have handicap plates on her car, mostly because of difficulty with breathing. And so she really can't walk very far. And so we've worked this out. But the truth is, if you look at her, she doesn't look like a person who would be labeled as handicapable, but she is. It's just a different type of a handicap that she has. And so women think they need to do everything for everyone all the time. Yes, that's very, very true, Dee. So, it's interesting because we have to remember not to judge people too as we go through life, because, you don't know a person until you walk a mile in their moccasins, kind of a thing. You need to have an understanding and be compassionate and loving toward others. And I also think that that's part of where the 65 days in a wake up comes, where we're sharing with each other the struggles we have as we go through the process. And because it's a safe place, we can kind of say, like, what did trainer Trish say? Embrace the suck. And she said about going through this, and that was a military term. And it's kind of like, you know what, you're going to have to get through it to get beyond it. And so instead of hating it, just embrace it. And I thought that was really good too. So thank you, ladies. I apologize for the delay in picking up your raised hands. Okay, so when one thing, the right thing, is set in motion, it can topple many things. And he said, and that's not all. Then we talk about a physics study that a single domino is capable of bringing down another domino that is actually 50% larger. And I love this on pages 14 and 15, where he talks about a geometric progression, which is like a long, long train starting out too slow to notice until it's moving too fast to stop. And how the first domino is just 2 inches tall. And then a few dominoes down, it's like a 6-foot tall man. And at domino number 18, it would be capable of knocking over the Leaning Tower of Pisa. And the 23rd domino could knock over the Eiffel Tower. And the 31st domino could knock over a domino as tall as Mount Everest. And the 57th domino that could be knocked over is almost the distance to the moon. And I thought that was really wild. So yes, we all talked about the domino effect can be positive, but it can also be negative. So we need to really be aware of the things that we're doing, because it can create an effect. And Tom even talked about this on the leadership call, talking about the appropriateness of where to talk about things. There are certain areas that we should and shouldn't talk about stuff that's going on. And not to say that they shouldn't be discussed, but it's about the location. And that's a very important thing, because sometimes there can be something that can be a negative observation that can be satisfied or corrected. But if it's out there in the open world, that may be something that is insurmountable for somebody who's not within the realms of longevity to be able to handle, what's being discussed. They may not understand the inner workings of how things happen. And so there's a place and a time for putting that domino in position and getting ready to knock it over, because you need to be prepared for what other things is it going to cause to collapse. And so we need to be thoughtful of that. And let's see, Linda said, after reading the chapters yesterday, I went on and turned off the notifications of many of the pages. They're just too many notifications. I don't know if I'll read the posts in the different sites. I never read the family and friends posts anymore. I don't have time. Yeah. And so that's good. So you're lessening the number of distractions, Linda. Thank you for sharing that. Okay. So regular dominoes fall in a linear progression, but then it becomes this geometric progression where it becomes bigger and bigger and bigger. Okay, so when you think about success, shoot for the moon. And there's an old saying, if you reach for the stars, you just might catch a cloud, right? So you want to try and go your best and see how far you can get. The moon is reachable if you prioritize everything and put all of your energy into accomplishing the most important thing. And the challenge is that life doesn't line everything up for us like a stack of dominoes and says, here's where you should start. Here's number one. We have to figure that out, right? Highly successful people know this. So every day they line up their priorities anew. Find the lead domino and whack away at it until it falls. Okay? And that's that one day at a time. Every single day, get up. Find that domino that is the most important and start whacking away at it until you can make it fall. So the question is, why does this approach work? Because extraordinary success is sequential, not simultaneous. What starts out linear becomes geometric. You do the right thing, and then you do the next right thing. Over time, it adds up, and the geometric potential of success is unleashed. The domino effect applies to the big picture, like your work or your business, and it applies to the smallest moment in each day when you're trying to decide what to do next. Success builds on success, and as this happens over and over, you move toward the highest possible success. When you see someone who has a lot of knowledge, they learned it over time. Someone has great skill, they developed it over time. When you see someone who has done a lot, they accomplished it over time. And when you see someone who has a lot of money, they earned it over time. The key is over time. Success is built sequentially. It's one thing at a time. And chapter 3, Success Leaves Clues. Og Mandino, who's one of my favorite authors, it is those who concentrate on but one thing at a time who advance in this world. Okay, so one product, one service. Extraordinarily successful companies always have one product or service they're most known for, or one that makes them the most money. For us, we have 90 for life. That's the cornerstone or the center of our work. Hang on a second. Let me kind of mute you. So when you think about what we have and what you do, that's why we'll often talk about what is the thing that you are most passionate about and focus on that, right? Because we have so many verticals that can be great for all different types of people and all different walks of life, but focus on something that's going to be the most success providing for you, all right? And so he goes on to talk about all the different places that have it. Kentucky Fried Chicken and Coors and Intel and Starbucks and Google and Star Wars and Apple. And he said sometimes the answer of what their one thing is that they specialize in isn't always clear, but that doesn't make finding it any less important. Technological innovations, cultural shifts, and competitive forces will often dictate that a business's one thing evolve or transform. The most successful companies know this and are always asking, what is our one thing? Okay. And truth is, there can only be one most important thing. Many things may be important, but only one can be the most important. That's by Ross Garber. And then, as we talked about at the beginning about having a mentor, one thing is a dominant theme that shows up in different ways. Take the concept and apply it to people, and you'll see where one person can make all the difference. So, for example, he tells a story about Walt Disney and trying to make it as an artist, and he wanted to be a cartoonist, and after graduation, he wanted to be a newspaper cartoonist out in the world, but couldn't get a job. So his brother, Roy, who was a businessman and a banker, got him to work at an art studio where he learned animation and began creating animated cartoons. When Walt was young, his one person was Roy, right? Think about that. Think about how different the world would be if Walt did not have his brother Roy, if he didn't have him to help to point him in the right direction, right? And think about the people in your life that you have that are helping to provide you with that direction of where to go. And then he talks about Sam Walton and Walmart, and Albert Einstein had Max Talmud, his first mentor. And then he goes on to say, no one, not one single person is self-made. And then he talks about Oprah Winfrey and George Martin, who's known as the fifth Beatle. And what he did is that he helped fill the gaps between the Beatles' raw talent and the sound they wanted to achieve. And so there's all these special things, special people in people's lives that will provide some insight or additional motivation or the missing piece to fill in the gap from where you are to where you want to be. And he said, everyone has one person who either means the most to them or was the first to influence, train, or manage them. Okay, so let's stop there for just a second. And I want you to think back about your life and who, for you, was an influential person in your life when you were growing up. A positive, influential person, not the guy on your shoulder that you want to punch in the nose. Would like to share something about a personal story? Just give a raise of hand or unmute yourself. I want you to feel this connection. That's why I want you to have this exercise. I want you to remember somebody who made you feel good enough to be able to accomplish something, or who gave you the motivation, encouragement, loving support to help you to do something. My fifth grade teacher, Miss Lee, writes D. Oh, I love that. That's beautiful. Yeah, you know what? It really is a gift to be a good teacher. And my mom from Marianne, yep. And it's hard when they're gone, right? You know, but I find my fourth grade teacher, Mr. Russo, says Jennifer. I love that. Mm-hmm. Yep. Teachers that I've had growing up, you know, and it's really funny because I think about my journalism teacher in high school, Mr. White, and it's really funny because we that all had him in high school together, we remember things that were silly things that he taught us about learning how to find the details of something, and all these articles that we had to read about Captuan and learning about the Lenni Lenape Indians and the Ottolotl stick, and you know the tool that they used that was a weapon, and you know things like that I can look back on now, and we laughed because the way that he presented himself, he was very animated and bizarre. But it was something that I'll never forget. Here I'm 52 years old, and I can remember vividly sitting in that classroom, and it was like a Victorian house that was a side to our high school, and we used to walk over there and we'd sit. It was like a living room, so we'd sit on the couches and the dining room table of this house and have class with Mr. White, and just the impact that he had on us to really pay close attention of what's the wow, Pammy Pearson, he would say to me, what's the wow, you know? And that was how the who, what, when, where, why, and how, but he would always teach us about the wow factor. And I think about that as we go through the coffee shop interview and finding out what's that wow, you know, what's the pain, what's the thing that matters. Peggy says her dad and later on mother-in-law, who still influences her at the age of 99. How blessed, how wonderful. Nancy said my dad and several teachers and a dear lady in church. Yes. Linda says, I don't remember anyone who really encouraged me. I'm not saying I never had a good teacher, but I was an A student in the inner core. They were just thankful that I was getting it. Yeah. You know, and so, you know, maybe use this as a little bit of an exercise to go back and find that beloved person. My pop-up was always beloved. He always made me feel so good about myself. But's really funny is that my mother, this is her father, and she didn't have the same perception of him as I did. And so it was about the relationship that we had together that I understood his sense of humor. My mom never really did. So one thing that she would remember from him is he would say, you know, she'd come home from school all excited. I got a 95 in a test, and Pop-Up would say, well, who stole the other 5 points from you? Now, that to me is really funny. And I thought that was hysterical. And that's how my pop-up would make a joke and, be loving. Well, she was sorely offended and still, at the age of 74, still talks about it as one of the most painful interactions that she ever had. So sometimes what we may have perceived to be a certain way, it's because of how we look at it. And maybe we need to stop and take a peek at it a little bit differently to feel that loving input from those that are around us. So thank you all for sharing. That was really, really neat. Okay, so let's see. So one passion, one skill. We each have passions and skills, but you'll see extraordinarily successful people with one intense emotion or one learned ability that shines through, defining them or driving them more than anything else. Often the line between passion and skill can be blurry. That's because they're almost always connected. And one of the quotes nearby, General George S. Patton, "You must be single-minded, drive for the one thing on which you have decided." And he goes on to say that, let's see, tour guide, he developed his skill and ultimately his business from his singular passion for his country. This is about Angelo Americo, and he loved Italy so much that he was the most successful tour guide. This deep desire to share it with others, and that was his passion and his success. So passion for something leads to disproportionate time practicing or working at it. That time spent eventually translates to skill, and when skill improve, results improve. Better results generally lead to more enjoyment and more passion, and more time is invested. It can be virtually a circle all the way to extraordinary results. And so again, the same with 65 and a Wake Up, where we're doing the same thing on a daily basis. At the beginning, we think, oh my gosh, I can never do this. There's no way. I don't know how I could possibly talk to 2 people a day and do one three-way. And then it becomes a simple thing. And then all of a sudden we're like, oh my gosh, I have so many people. I don't know. I've got way too many than just 2. And you start tripping over them. And so that's what happens is the old story, with practice makes perfect. So then he goes on to talk about a member of an African tribe learning to be a runner, and how his life was in danger, and he actually was able to get away from a life-threatening situation and be able to change that passion and that gift into a theme in his life, where he created this passion into a skill, and then it became an extraordinary life for him, and he was able to use it to create a fundraising effect called Run for the Water to help support needy. Excuse me one second. I have a sneeze, and I thought it was going to come, and it didn't come. So sorry. It didn't happen. I scared my sneeze away. Okay, so in any event, the one thing shows up time and time again in the lives of the successful because it is a fundamental truth. And if you let it, it will show up for you. Bill Gates, of course, with his computer, he goes on to say. And then in the last section of the one thing, the doors to the world have been flung wide open, and the view that's available is staggering. As inspiring as this can be, it can be equally overwhelming, right? It's like, oh my gosh, I don't know if I can handle this. Harried and hurried, we attempt too much and accomplish too little. So where do we begin? How do we choose? How do you make the best decision possible, experience life at an extraordinary level, and never look back? Live the one thing. And what Curly, going back to the movie in the beginning, talked about. The one thing sits at the heart of success and is the starting point for achieving extraordinary results. Explaining it is easy. Buying into it can be tough. Oh, hang on one second. Nope, didn't come. So, explaining it is easy. Buying into it, it can be tough. Before we can have a frank heart-to-heart discussion about how the one thing actually works, Gary Keller wants to openly discuss the myths and misinformation that keep us from accepting it. They are the lies of success. Ooh, boy, that's an oxymoron right there. The lies of success. Once we banish these from our minds, we can take up the one thing with an open mind and a clear path. So that's the end for today. And next week, we're going to start in part 1, the lies. They mislead and derail us. And I would ask that you read the beginning and chapters 4, 5, and 6. We may not cover them all, but read those, and then we'll do as best as we can. Sneeze stage fright. Yeah, I'm sorry. And I feel like it's still going to come, and it just won't come. Yeah. Okay. So anyway, all right. Any questions, comments that you guys have? Did you enjoy that first part of our book?
I think it's great, and I so appreciate you putting this together and breaking it down again. I've listened to it a couple times, and it's one of my favorite books. But, you know, sitting here really going through it slowly and, you know, part by part is really, really powerful. Thank you.
Thank you. This is my pleasure. I've always loved to read books, and I always love reading books with my kids. And I think that hearing it and reading it can be, when you do them together, it's much more impactful. So I think it's really important.
Yes, absolutely.
Thank
Great
you very
job.
much. Oh,
Yeah,
thank
no,
you.
this is good. Because like I've listened to this too, and I'm doing the Audible and reading through this at the same time. So
Yep.
awesome.
Yeah, I have all three things.
Yep.
And you know what? You learn with different methodologies. And I find listening, looking, you know, reading, and writing just really makes a big difference in learning it. But thank you again.
Oh, and thank you. You know, I think having us all together to have different perspective and input is crucial, because we all, you know, as Mike Battistelli has always taught me, a rising tide raises all ships. And, you know, for us to work together, where each of you may have caught something that I didn't catch, that, you know, we're going to help each other to really dig deep and find the truth. And so I'm just really thankful that all of you can be here with me as well. So if that's it, then we finished up a couple minutes early, and we will reconvene next Thursday at 8 p.m. Eastern Time.
Thanks a lot. Have a good weekend, everyone.
Thank you. Love you guys.
Bye.
Have a great week.
Love you guys. God bless.